everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Ben Burgess, and I'm joined today by the hosts of the Behind the Door podcast for our first episode. We've got Jeremy Hiltz, founder and CEO of Recovery Connections of Maine and Recovery Housing of Maine. He's a person in long-term recovery. He's a veteran of the Maine Department of Corrections and is a recovery and prison reform advocate. To his side, we've got Brandon Brown, who is a project coordinator for Maine Prisoner Advocacy Coalition, a policy associate at the University of Southern Maine's Catherine Cutler Institute, and restorative practices facilitator. He has taught classes at Colby College and the University of Maine Augusta, and he's a PhD candidate at George Mason University. Brandon was incarcerated from the ages of 21 to 35 and was the first prisoner to ever obtain a master's degree in the state of Maine. He is an advocate for reform across the recovery and justice spectrum. What's up, guys?
Yes, Benny, yes. Thank you, my friend. What's up, everybody? We're here for Behind the Door. Like you heard Benny Burgess say over here, episode 1. We're kicking this thing off. I'm sure you guys, for those of you listening, for those of you watching, you might know, you might not know, we got a big-ass prison door behind us. And that's really what this whole thing is about, right? Start revealing what's behind the door on both sides. And I got my man Jeremy here. And, you know, Jeremy, I think we got to tell the people before we even start getting into anything, like, what's the deal with this door? Where did this door come from, man?
Things to talk about. About 2 years ago, I reached out to the commissioner of the Department of Corrections. In my work with Recovery Connections in Maine, Recovery Housing in Maine, we focus a lot on reentry. We take guys into our recovery homes that a lot of them are on SCCP or home confinement. And through that relationship, I was able to ask the Department of Corrections for this one particular door that was being from the Maine Correctional Center that was being taken. It was being torn down, and I thought like that would be cool to have the door that held me captive for a little while. And that door was particularly special to me, and not necessarily the door, but the time that I spent behind the door was particularly special to me. Prior to this, I had been in and out of prison my entire life. So it was about 2007. I got sent over to this drug rehab inside the system called the Correctional Recovery Academy. And that at that time, I did not necessarily want to be in recovery. I had been bought into the prison system in the code, if you will, my entire life, right? And that was the first time that I had challenged that thinking or that way of life, or this sort of type of loyalty I had for other people that were doing time with me and stuff like that. And I also, while I was there, my roommate behind this door his name was Michael Connors, and currently Michael works with me. He's a program manager of our residential program. We've been able to work together for a number of years now, and when I was doing time, like during the day, like in my prison life, I could do that. You know what I mean? Like, going down, lifting weights and going down, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't hard during the day, right? The hardest times for me when I was locked up was at night when the door closed, when the thing locked up and I could not get out of the cell. You know what I mean? That's where all the thoughts, that's where all the regret came up in my mind. That's where all the guilt came up. That's where I started missing my family the most, all that stuff. And behind this door in particular, Michael and myself, we sort of connected in a way that was like, we started telling him some things that I never told anybody. And he reciprocated that, right? And it was the first time that I ever, I'd hang out with, people in prison and shit, and it just wasn't the same. We were in a therapeutic community up there, And through that process, we got really close, and it was the first time that I ever connected with somebody and didn't want anything from them. You know what I mean? So, so the door sort of signifies, it kind of represents that thing. You know what I mean? Like the experiences that we had up there. It was a tough program, and we also another person that works with us, on a day. He's our housing director, Bill Walbridge. He was a couple doors down from us. Was a huge mentor to us, and I heard that they were tearing that part of the prison down, and so through my work with reentry and stuff, I took a shot, and I asked the commissioner, hey, can I have this door? Can you save this door for me? And I made the request, and I hadn't heard from them for about a year, and then Ryan Thornell, who is now I think he's running the Arizona State Department of Corrections. He went out of his way to make it happen so I could get the door. And I think it was in his last, month or so working, he called me up and said, I'm going to get this door for you because I think it means a lot, and I think it could be a sign of hope for other people, And so when they called us up and invited us to the main correctional center. And I went and picked the door up, like they were there. They had this. It was crazy because they had this whole, welcoming committee for me to receive this door, and it was just like, and this is the thing, man. And to me, like I say, I can't believe they did this for me because, like, when I was doing time, it wasn't like I was, I was doing time. I was a convict, right? I wasn't hiding in my cell, right? Like I was in the mix of everything. I had, I would get in trouble. I was like trying to fit in when I was a kid, and that caused all kinds of problems for me. Like it caused, solitary confinement, all that stuff. You know what I mean? I did 10 and a half months out in the Supermax at one point. So the door, to be able to gain control of this door after it had control of me for so long, it was very powerful because when I got the door, I'm like, man, first of all, I was like, what the hell am I going to do with this door? You know what I mean? So when we got the door, when I got the door, I was like, I had the door, and I was like, what am I going to do with it? You know what I mean? And at first I said, I'm gonna just hang it to the treatment in the hallway of the treatment center, And then I started talking to Benny and you and a couple of the people, and I see it as something tangible that we can build a platform around. I think there's so many different conversations that need to happen, and not only for educational purposes, but for people that are transitioning out into the community. Like this could really signify a way to, like, in a tangible way to, say we made it out. You know what I mean? You did a lot of time yourself, Brandon, and it's like you made it out here, and now we got this door sitting behind us, and I think it can be a vehicle to get people to where they, the hope that like they can make it out here in society. You know what I mean? And we can gain control. This is really what it looks like for me, is that this door, we can gain control of our lives. We can gain control of the system that's like literally tearing people down and getting people trapped in it, And so when we talk about behind the door, it's not just about being behind the door. It's about what happens when that door gets locked, you know what I'm saying? And what we have been going through collectively, you know what I mean, as people that have been incarcerated, and I think held captive and incarcerated are one and the same, right? Like I was held there against my will, and the trauma of that, just that alone, you know what I mean? Just not even talking about what happened before I got there, right? Or what happened while I was there, the things we saw, the things we had to go through. this could be like there's a lot more that happens behind that door than people think. You know what I mean? Like just as a piece of that, like behind this door that I'm sitting in front of right now. Every Sunday night, I got two free stamps. I didn't have like financial support coming in from the community, and I would get you get two free stamps a week, so you could write to people. And I wrote my daughter and my son letters every Sunday night, and I never got a response. And I would sit in that cell when the door was locked, thinking about what my kids were doing, and like, are they ever gonna really, you know what I mean? Like, is this ever gonna stop for them, for us? You know what I'm saying? All that stuff, and so there's just a lot that happens behind that door at night when the lights get dimmed. They didn't turn them off, but when the lights get dimmed, you know what I mean? So that's what this door sort of signifies for me.
And there's a whole other part to that, right? Because like you've been talking about when you're behind this door, all the things that you go through, and I think like a good thing that we want to really turn people onto is that there's a lot of stereotypes and stories about what happens behind the prison doors, behind the prison gates, behind the prison walls, and a lot of that is really rooted in, like that people are evil and there's all this drama going on and violence and all these things. But like you're talking about some things that were like, no, I really found myself behind this door. And even though the door itself was like this symbol of oppression, it was the thing that locked you in and that, locked you into that negative thought cycle about what was going on outside and everything. But at the same time, at some point, you made the decision to, like, make some positive changes behind the door and in a community of people also doing that. And that's just not something that we talk with people in society enough about, right? That there's not just one thing happening behind the prison walls, behind the prison doors. People are going through things on the full spectrum of being human, from the most negative to the most positive, and being able to shine a light on that and actually get the door. And I just want to stop for a second and really let you know and let the people know that a lot of people probably think that you're out of your mind, right? Like you got the actual door. Like this is not, we didn't go on eBay or on Facebook Marketplace and buy a prison door. Like you got the actual door.
The actual door
that you were held behind. And I imagine, I mean, what was it like for you when you first got it? Did you ever have any nights or any days in the first couple of weeks that you had this door where you're like, what the hell am I doing with this door, man?
100%. I'm still asking myself that right now. You know what I mean? But like, yeah, it's like almost like I was saying, like it's almost like a control thing. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like a signal that like I won, like I made it out of that lifestyle and the decisions that had brought me to prison to begin with, And there is just a lot of things that like, the little stuff that happens. Like I can remember when I was in that cell here behind this door that I had this plant. It was a little plant, and I had never really taken care of anything up until that point. I had this little plant that, like, I would just give water to, and I, like, kind of just watched that thing grow the whole time. And by the end of it, it was, like, this metaphor of, like, this is me. Like, I can grow. Like, I can do this. You know what I mean? The actual program that I was in, it was very foreign to me because we, growing up in the system, I was like, the snitching, stuff like that it was very, very important to me to gain my status, to like always like hold on to this code like that. And it was the first time that I was breaking through that. You know what I mean? It was the first time that I was seeing myself as I don't have to live like this. You know what I mean? And the people that were like preaching that stuff weren't my friends. You know what I mean? They were not. They did not like my family and like jobs that I was going to go get later on. I never put on a resume. Like I never snitched on this guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? I never told on this person. So it was like, you know what I mean?
That's an important part of the prison resume, though, right?
In
complete
the prison
complete
resume.
culture shift. That's like basically how you introduce yourself to people. Like, what's up? I'm Jeremy. I'm a solid ass guy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
I
for
follow
real.
the code, but that's not going to translate out here.
No, it doesn't translate out there.
Doing an interview and be like, tell me about yourself. Be like, I ain't never snitched.
Right, and that's where that's what I'm talking about. The code piece that had to be like smashed and obliterated, so I could see myself in a different way. You know what I mean? Like I could not see past that thing, because, to be honest, like with all the time that I had done, because I had been doing time from the 90s to the 2007. You know what I mean? And it's literally what kept me in that lifestyle. You know what I'm saying? It kept me going, and I didn't have enough belief in myself to see past it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then once I started going, man, I think I can make it out here. You know what I mean? I think I can do this. You know what I mean? And talking about, writing letters to my children, I really thought that, like, if I got out this time and I worked a part-time job or a small job, and I saw my kids every other weekend, like, I thought that would be success. You know what I mean? And even then, like, I was short-sighted then, and to be where I'm at now, to be able to be sitting in here with you in front of the door after we took this thing to New York City, gaining control of that, and now thinking about partnering up with you and figuring out, like, how we can tell these stories and educate and use our platform to further this education and further help people that are transitioning out and their families and all that stuff. This is what this thing is all about for me. So, when we instead of hanging the thing up in my office, we welded some feet to the door, and so that we could set it up the way it is now. And when we took the door out to New York City, some of these pictures back here. Especially when we're in Times Square, one of these photos, it really shows, like, the way, we sat this door in the middle of Times Square, right? And, like, probably everybody around it just walked by it. There wasn't much conversation about it, right? They were just like, what is this? People didn't even care.
They didn't even look at it.
Didn't even look at the door.
It was just an object in the way of people going to wherever they were going.
And that is, like, really how our society has been programmed to view prison and view like the system. That we're just going to keep walking by it. It's not our issue. You know what I mean?
And I think that's an important thing just to jump into as well, because, like, I think when people, first of all, I just have the feeling when people hear the story about you having your prison door, even though we've been talking about it for a few minutes, they probably find it to be like a really wild concept that somebody would actually want the very thing that held them captive. But like you said, it's about taking control, and that's really what we aim to do with the podcast is kind of take control of the narrative out here in society about who prisoners are and what happens in prisons and what people in prison are capable of doing or not doing. But also there's another aspect of it that when we think behind the door, if you ask somebody what they think behind the door means, they're probably going to assume that, like, it's about some people who are in prison, do this podcast, and they were, what did they go through when they were in prison? But we also got to talk about the other aspect of that, which is the other side of that coin, that every door has two sides to it, right? And every door closes into a room and opens into something. And so we're also here to talk about what's behind the door, and you already spoke a little bit about it when you were inside writing the letters to your kids. Like, they are also behind the door in a couple different ways. Number one, they're behind the door with you on the inside of that cell, because those are your children, that's your family. You going to prison broke some aspect of your family and took you away from that environment to be able to be the father that you want to be. But on the other end of that, they're behind the door because you're on this side and they're behind it, and all of society is behind it, and the world is behind the door for you. And that's something that we really want to shine a light on, is when you're in prison, and it doesn't matter if you're in prison for a month or you're in prison for 20 years, 30 years, or anywhere in between, on the other side of that door awaits a lot of different things for you. Awaits a world that is now becoming foreign to you if you're doing a lot of time. Awaits all of the trauma that you left behind when you came to prison. Behind the door awaits all of the stigma and the stereotype and the shame of being in prison. But behind that door also awaits a society that's full of possibilities for you if you do what you did with this door, which is take control of your future and your possibilities. And so this podcast is not just about what happens with people in prison and what they go through when they're behind the door. This podcast is also about making people understand that on both sides of that door is a world of people incarcerated, because society is incarcerated with their views about what prison should be, what the criminal legal system should be, what justice means, and what repairing and healing and all these things mean. And these are all things that we need. And like Jeremy's talking about, just to like frame this for people, like we drove this door down to New York City in the back of my man's truck with no plan, right? We had no plan.
Zero plan.
No plan at all. We just knew that we had something special. We had like this 300-pound steel metal prison door, cell number 18.
18, baby.
That my boy was behind. And Jeremy called me one day and he says, let's take this thing to New York City, man. And I was like, I don't know why or what, but yeah, let's do it. And so we went, and you'll see on the social media pages that we took pictures of this door with the Statue of Liberty behind it, right? We took pictures of this door in Times Square with 10,000 people walking around it. And one thing when we were looking at the pictures and we're looking at these videos after that Jeremy's talking about is we realized, like, man, this prison door is in the middle of Times Square and nobody has any idea, right? People see it. It's a giant steel door that's very much out of place in the middle of Times Square, which is all lights and glamour and style, and we got this dusty ass prison door in the middle of it. It doesn't fit, right? It doesn't make sense that it's there. And instead of people stopping and being curious to say, like, what the hell is going on here, we had tens of thousands of people that just walked by. And some people, like, we got videos like a guy will touch the door, but he won't stop and look at it. He just touched it and kept moving. And what we really realized is that this is really a symbol of what mass incarceration is in our country.
Yeah.
Right? This is a symbol of what the fight to save people's lives in the recovery community is in our country. Right? These things are the door. They're there. Everybody knows they're there. You can't ignore that it's there because you literally got to walk around it. But what do people do? Right? For the majority of people, we know mass incarceration exists. And we just walk right around it. We skirt right around it. As long as we don't have to confront it, we don't. So if there's a path around it, we move around it. And so what we're trying to do with this podcast is really make people understand that the door is here. And the only way to get to making some changes in society that are going to benefit everybody is by, like, acknowledging the door, right? Stopping, talking about it, talking about what happens behind that door on both sides. And I think that, you know, we're going to get into future episodes a little bit more about our trip down to New York City, and, you know, definitely keep your eye out because we're going to be selling some merchandise, some pretty cool T-shirts and sweatshirts.
Yeah, all going to prison reform. All the money's going to go to prison reform.
Yeah, and so, you know, we're really trying to take control, like Jeremy keeps talking about, take control of this door, take control of this narrative, and give some control back to the people who are the most affected by the system to be the ones who actually shine a light on the system. Yeah. And like, man, you talked about a little bit in the beginning, like, this door is not just about you, and this door is not just about me, and it's not just about us in this podcast. Like, you got people working for you who were also behind this actual door and who were also behind doors exactly like this on the same block that you were behind this door on. And, like, I just really want to ask you about that too, man. Like, how does that feel like? Because way before you had this door, you took control of something else, right? You took control of your life, but you also took control of how you could lift other people up in a system that has been tearing you down. And so what's it like to have these guys that did time with you now working with you and for you, you know, really making a difference out here, changing people's lives?
Yeah, it's really an absolute honor because I don't, you know, when in terms of working and making a paycheck and stuff, you know, I'm fortunate. I have, like, some of my best friends that are working with me on a daily basis, and you know, it's really, it's surreal some days. I get out of bed and I'm like, oh, I get to go down and hang out with not just one, but 2, 3, 4. You know what I mean? Like, I have so many people that have the same experiences and have the same, like sort of belief system that we just have to keep helping our next brother or sister that's coming out or that's out here either struggling or doing real well. We just got to be there for each other no matter where we are at. When I was in that program, I bought into this thing. There was a director there, Director Jim. He really changed my life and shaped my life. But one of the things he did, he instilled in me was that, like, you know, if you get out of here and you do well and you start going down a good road and stuff, it's your responsibility to pull out the next guy, right? Like if you make it out of the fire, it's your job. It's your responsibility to turn around and help somebody else make it out of that same fire. I can't make it out and then just not care about the people that are still there. You know, I go to the Maine State Prison a lot, and you know, we do a lot of groups and outreach, and we pick people up and we do all this stuff, and you know, one of the things I've had to come to, and it might sound weird, but like to come to terms with is like people look at me and what we've been doing as a sign of hope. Like there's like hope there with what we're doing, and I'm starting to like actually see that in a lot of ways. Like before, I was just like, you know, I'm just gonna help the next dude. You know what I mean? I'm just gonna help the next sister that's struggling out there. Like I'm just gonna be there for them. And now it's like we got this train rolling, right? Like, and people just keep getting on. You know what I mean? It's like choo choo, motherfucker, because we're just choo, right? Yeah, for real, right? Like, because there's like this movement that's happening that I'm just a one part of. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But it all comes back to like, you know, if I make it out, do I just forget about the people that are still there? You know, I mean, I have friends that are doing life in prison.
Because that's an easy thing to do too, right? Like a lot of people will go to that. It's like, you know, I've fallen so far that if I get out and I get on my feet, that the number one thing I got to preserve is my feet, right? I got to stay on it, and it can be easy for people to come home and really prioritize themselves. And to a certain extent you have to, because you can't pick the next person up unless you got stable ground under you anyway. But it is something that like almost you learn while you're in prison, that like, no, I have to get out and I have to do good for me. And like you said, this has become a symbol of hope. It's become something that people watching the work that you do, the work that's going on around us, is like, no man, that's like, we really can change the system by lifting each other up and like lifting up people's voices.
Well, this is what I believe, right? The system is always going to be the system. Mm-hmm. There's no way that like we can like change sentencing guidelines, right? There's no way that we can change how, you know, how much time people are getting, or we can't really change the, you know, how the poverty that people live in, the social challenges that people have that have been incarcerated. We can't really necessarily, but what I believe that we can do is change individuals, mm-hmm. right? Like one individual at a time. Eventually, like the sort of the demand is going to go down, right? Like but like I know that, you know, we can have an impact on the individual, you know what I mean? And I can start with the people that I know, you know what I mean? The people that I know are struggling, and just be there for them. And hopefully that changes, like it starts to change, because of what I do know is that the people, like you were mentioning, the people that work with us and are sort of around us, that I know have been in and out, or done decades in prison and stuff. They ain't going back right now. You know what I mean? Like they're here, they're happy, they're working, you know, they're doing things that make them happy, and like that is the movement. So like to change, I leave the change to like guys like you, Brandon, and some, you know, some of these other organizations. Like my goal is to just bring another person into this particular movement right here, now. You know what I mean?
Well, it's about, Recovery Connections of Maine is about connections, right? It's about community. And, you know, that's one of the things that we look historically, we look at, you know, the history of prison reform, and we look at, you know, where people are falling off and falling short, and a lot of times it's in the absence of community, it's in the absence of connection.
Yeah, we need community. Have to have community.
Yeah,
that's like the biggest thing, right? It's
Yeah.
like if we have community, we have something. No matter what, if we have a
Yeah.
community, if we're connected to a community, we don't ever have to be alone again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's like you were talking about too before, is, you know, a lot of times the system, it's like a Herculean task to think about changing the system, because the system is always going to adapt. It's what it's always done. And so even if we can change sentencing guidelines, even if we can change the way that our prisons operate, the system is always going to adapt to do what it's always done. Like, we talk about criminal justice reform, and we don't talk enough about like the adaptation of the criminal justice or the criminal legal system. And what we haven't seen a lot, we've seen it in pockets, like, but we haven't seen it enough, is like this establishment of community and this taking control of things, because we have to really identify what can we take control of.
This prison door, I can do that.
Yeah, and we could take, and I also just let's just hold on for a second, because there was one thing you talked about earlier that I just can't get out of my mind, right? And we can always come back to the reform conversation, because we're gonna have hopefully 100, 200, 1,000 episodes about this.
Yeah.
You know, it's on you guys to support this, and hopefully you do. But I keep coming back to this thing, because I've been back to the prison a handful of times as well. In the work that I do, I've been to almost every facility in the state of Maine. I mean, I've never had a welcoming committee, and I think about the fact that you came back to Maine Correctional Center to pick up a damn door. It's like, if we just ask you as listeners to think about what must have been going through the mind of the people in the Department of Corrections when Jeremy called and said, "Yo, I really want door 18 from the CRA program. I know that you're tearing it down. Like, I'd like to actually have that door." Like, they must have thought that you were out of your mind, right?
Maybe, but one of the things that they said to me that really stuck out to me, because in this like mindset of like, I just want to help the next one more person, right? That has kept me going back to the prisons for a long time. Like, when I first got out, I think there was a 6-month wait before I could come back in and do this like alumni group. But ever since then, like, I've been going back on a regular basis. I've always been in contact, and so we're going on. You know, I've been out now since 2007, so almost 16 years I've been out. But like, during this whole time, I've always gone through this. You know what I mean? The whether it didn't matter what who the administration was or anything like that. But I think the DOC saw me just keep coming back with this consistency and stuff. And you know, when I first came in, I didn't have nothing much to offer except for like just hang in there almost. You know what I mean? But now, like, we've developed like recovery houses and treatment, and like, you know what I mean, we have the ability to get guys out on home confinement, and so I think they recognize that, like, that you know, I'm not just a help anymore, I'm like a community partner that they have, you know what I mean? And I think that they are recognizing that, and I think they recognize the significance of like what this door will symbolize. And it may not be all of the Department of Corrections. I just want to say that, like, I mentioned Ryan Thornell before. I think he is the one that like kind of drove it home.
Vision.
Yeah.
And it, you know, it's kind of wild, because, you know, if you ask a lot of people in society about prison reform and anything about prisoners, honestly, what you hear is like, hey man, you do the crime, you do the time. Right, you earned your way in there, and now whatever happens to you while you're in there is what happens to you. We're not going to really concern ourselves with it. And it's really kind of a crazy thing to think about, the fact that there's a lot of people out in the world that think that like you earned your way behind the door, and then now there's some people who, you know, were your captors, right? They were like the officers who oversaw you, the administration who made decisions about your life and what you could do, and like, you know, in some ways, in a lot of ways, you earned the door. Yeah. Right, and that's how they're looking at it. Is like you said, like, you've shown up with this consistency, this mission, this vision to really lift people up out of the cycles of addiction, and show them a pathway into recovery, and also you've modeled it in your own personal life that it is possible that through consistency out here you can really have the things you want and not have to go back. But then you made the choice to consciously go back and model that for people inside. And so, like, when you asked for this door, you know, I mean, I don't know what the decision-making process was like, but to me, it's really a no-brainer, right? That they're going to throw the door away. They're literally going to scrap it anyway. And so when you ask for this door, I think some people might have been like, you know, distrusting, because that's what the Department of Corrections does. They don't trust a good idea sometimes. They got to think about what's underneath this idea and what's all this. But man, like you earned the door, right? And that's what I really hear you talking about a lot too. Is, you know, you've put in the work and you've lifted people up, and you've grown this Recovery Connections of Maine thing, and so now you got people in the Department of Corrections who used to look down on you, right? When you were in 10.5 months in Supermax and solitary confinement, you know, a lot of people looked at you like you're an animal, and now they look at you like you're a different type of animal now, right? Like now you're a different type of animal. You're somebody with the tenacity not to quit, you know, and now we got this door, and we got lifting people up, continuing to give people the pathways, and also like a lot of guys that are in your programs, like you said, are coming out of the prisons and the jails, and then they see this door, and then what do? They ask about it, and then you get to talk about control, and you get to talk about this is why we're doing what we're doing, man, because we're trying to take control of our lives and ourselves and our recovery the same way I took control of this door that used to be the thing that held me in, that controlled me. I didn't have a choice. Yeah. And I think it's important to highlight that trust that you've built with the Department of Corrections through showing up who you are every single day and being committed to the work. It is like such a key piece of anything that we're talking about. It takes consistency, and it takes, you know, it takes not giving up, and it takes facing the challenges and the hard days every single day, whether we're talking about recovery or not going back to prison once you've come out. Like, these are the aspects of our lives once we've been behind that other side of the door that we have to really instill into us if we want to have any hope for making it out here. And I think it's just a testament, man, the fact that you had a welcoming committee all excited to give you a 300-pound prison door. And just for the record, I don't know if it weighs 300 pounds, but the shit is heavy as hell. We carried it around New York City, so we know it's heavy. Yeah. We'll have to actually weigh it one of these days. But, you know, like, you had people welcoming you, like, in some ways excited, but really that was a display too, right? Because it was a display of the work that you've been doing, and a display of gratitude that you've been doing it. And now you got this door, man, and nobody can take this door from you. No. It's your property now. Yep. Right? Nobody can take this door from you, and we can take this door wherever we want. New York City, wherever we want to go with it, we can take the door. And it used to be the thing that actually prevented you from going anywhere. Yeah. And that's just a really crazy story for people to really understand. Like, we're mobile with this door. It's got feet. We can stand it up anywhere. Yeah. and this door was the thing. Yeah. You know, specifically this exact door for Jeremy for a period of his life was the thing that held him in one place with no option when he could leave and when he couldn't. He could only leave when the door opened, right? And even where he could go after that was just behind another series of doors. And we've all been behind those doors, right? The people that we've got around us that we're surrounding ourselves with in this work. And now we could stop the podcast right now, pick this door up, and just go down the street, post up at a restaurant with it, and eat our lunch in front of it. Yeah. That's wild, man. Yeah. That's wild, bro. Yeah,
but it just does show. It just does talk about the control. And one of the things when we were in New York City, and I was one of my favorite spots that we were at was in front of the Statue of Liberty. Mm-hmm. Right, we had this door in front of the Statue of Liberty, and there was like. I look at that like the Statue of Liberty. I brought my prison door to the Statue of Liberty, and it really makes me question like what that looks like. What, like liberty? You know what I mean? Like, we incarcerate more people in our country than any other country in the world.
We incarcerate more people in Maine, which is probably the nation's smallest prison system, than any other country in the world. Just in Maine.
Just in Maine.
Maine alone.
Just in Maine alone. So. So to have that as a symbol of like, what is this? You know what I'm saying? How can this prison door be in front of the Statue of Liberty and no one really gives a shit? People walking by, like, what's not being able to recognize the symbolism of it. Like, we have, you think about that, like the liberty. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is like, it's liberty for some. You know what I'm saying? It's not liberty for all. Yeah. No, you know what I mean? Like, and so I thought it was like powerful there. You know what I mean? That the liberty and that the liberty is like is it real? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Is it real? Is this an illusion of what's going on? Like mental health stuff going on, substance use stuff going on, all that stuff, and really how it relates to sort of what you were just saying is it's like there's like two sides to that, right? Like, the DOC, and I'm grateful that they gave me the door, right? I'm grateful that they see this as a sign of hope. But it took me 16 years to get the respect from them, right? Like I had to like literally grind it out for over a decade in order to see some folks to look at me like I was like I could be could be a help to these folks that are getting out. You know what I mean? It took a long, long time. You know what I mean? And so when we talk about like when we talk about liberty, it's like, well, I did have to grind it out in order to get that type of respect, right? And so, and I know that I'm like sort of a rare case in what they see on a daily basis, but like, how come it's hard to see the folks that have been living in prison as a sign of hope for the next guy that's coming out, and like, why can't we set this thing up so that it's like there's more of us, more of me, more of, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm not like special in any way. I just been grinding it out. You know what I mean? But can we get to a place where when somebody comes out of the system that like they're set up to help the next guy? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's not a conversation we have enough, right? We talk a lot about when somebody comes out of the system, are they set up to help themselves, which is the first step. But, we got to get to the conversation about how can we get people out of the system that are set up to, create and engage in the community and help the next guy and be a source of inspiration, help the next sister, help the next woman, because we're all sons and daughters and fathers and cousins and friends and brothers and sisters. All these things are true. And how do we, bring the community that we find inside outside in a new way, right? And how do we make it so it doesn't take 16 years for people to believe that you can be part of the solution even if you've been part of the problem, right? And just on another note, like, we've got these pictures of the Statue of Liberty behind this prison door, and we've got these pictures and these videos of people walking around it in Times Square, and like what we're really trying to do, what we're aiming to do is like really generate a conversation about like what is free, what is liberty, right? In the context of some of these major social problems that we have going on in the United States of America, right? In the state of Maine, for 3 years consecutively, we've had more and more people dying of overdose. Every single year we set a new record of people dying of overdose from the opiate epidemic and the fentanyl epidemic that's happening right now. And and even though incarceration rates and crime rates go up and down, one thing we know for sure is that in the United States of America, in what we call the land of the free, we incarcerate significantly more people than anywhere else in the world. Even some of the countries that we consider to be like the absolute worst at providing freedom for their people, we incarcerate way more people than them, and we hold people behind these doors, and then we hold them to a lifetime of struggle and disenfranchisement and all these things from really obtaining like what type of full life that they should have, because everybody makes mistakes. And so we've got this contrast of the Statue of Liberty, behind this prison door, because while we were in prison, we looked through that window to just see like a level of freedom that we wish we had, with just the ability to like walk to the microwave at 10 o'clock at night if we were hungry. And then we also had to imagine that behind this door that there was a pathway for like a good life and freedom and all these things, just to come home and realize that's harder work than we've probably ever engaged in our life, is just to exercise our own little bit of freedom. And what we hope these pictures inspire people to have like a real genuine conversation about what does it look like to engage with these really hard topics, and consider about the fact that we have 2.3 million people in our prisons, and on the other side of that door is a symbol like the Statue of Liberty, right? That's supposed to say we welcome everybody, and this is the land of the free, where you can pursue opportunities and you can pursue success and all these things. But how many ways do we not allow people to do that, especially if they've touched our criminal legal system in some way? And it's like, man, it's such a beautiful idea that you had to bring the door down. And for the group of us that experienced, like, actually bringing the door down there, and the power of that imagery, the symbolism that was like staring at us right in our face as we looked at the Statue of Liberty behind this door, and we looked at thousands of people walking around this door like it wasn't there. It's inspiring, and the hope, and talk a little bit about this. Like, the hope is that such an outlandish idea as you getting your prison door and welding some goddamn feet on it and throwing it in the back of your truck. I mean, we drove from Maine to New York, a 6-hour drive, just with this giant prison door in the back of your truck.
It's fun, though. It's fun.
And the hope is that some people will look at this and be so kind of like maybe thrown off or maybe engaged, whatever the case may be, to really say, like, what the hell does all of this mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the thing that when you talk about the 2.3 million people that are in prison, I think about how many of those people are fathers and mothers, right? So it's like not just the 2.3 million people that are actually incarcerated, like you were saying earlier. Like, what about the sons and daughters of these folks that are incarcerated that like may never see their family again? The trauma that happens to them because their parent is gone. You know what I mean? It removed from the family. That's another piece of this thing. It's like, I'm getting older now, right? And a lot of the folks that I was incarcerated with and stuff, now that I run this treatment center, I'm seeing their kids come into treatment, right? Yeah. And it's like, I can't, every time I see them, all I can think of is like, wow, man, I knew your dad. You know what I mean? And this isn't, like, I know this isn't what he wanted for you. You know what I mean? But like, you can, like, it's like the tangible. It's not a statistic, right? It's not like,
no, you can't
right?
quantify
like
it. You can't measure it.
I see it, and I'm like, wow, man. Like, and like you had mentioned the overdoses and stuff. Like, from the time I was, I was in the Maine Youth Center, early teens, and from that point on, like, till now, there's not many. You know what I mean? The death rate of the folks that I was incarcerated with then till now is just, it doesn't make any sense to me. You know what I mean? It's like what is going on? You know what I mean? And so, like, and then I've also on many occasions, like, knew a parent that had passed away that I had done time with, and then you see their children coming into treatment or struggling out there on the streets, and
in the cycle of being in jail and prison, in the cycle of addiction.
It's all that impact of that 2.3 million people that are actually incarcerated.
Yeah, physically now.
But like, how many of those people? Like, we're talking about 2.3 million people, right? So if somebody has 4 people that are close to them, how many people is that? 2.3 million times 4, right? That's how many people on a minimum have been impacted. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then the impact that trauma has of that person going to prison, how that, you know what I mean? The reaction of the choices that I've been, there was a time I knew a guy that had been doing life. Actually, this happened multiple times where, a guy's doing a long stretch for whatever happened, right? And then their children are
come into the system,
just to be with their parents. You know what I mean? Just to be close to their parents, to break bread with them.
I was in a pod. This is probably like 2011. I think 2011-ish. One of the pods I was in, we had 3 generations. We had a grandfather, a father, and a son. 3 generations of a family all playing cards together in the prison. Nice. And it's like, it's crazy that you bring this up now, because I could flash back to that day and really, like, remember pretty vividly just how sad I found that. Right, that, like, man, none of, like, people, like, sometimes people just don't stand a chance. Like, you grow up and it's all you know, and then, like you said, your father, your mother goes to prison for a significant amount of time, and We don't have a society that helps children deal with the trauma of having a parent incarcerated. We don't have a society that helps people deal with the hardship of having a family member or a close friend, right? Not even just to say the mental and emotional toll that it takes on people, but also the financial toll that it takes on families when a breadwinner gets incarcerated. We have a society that doesn't even really consider that. And when we're talking about behind the door, like, that's another thing we're talking about. We talk about the 2.3 million people that Jeremy's referencing. Like, that's like a pretty hard approximation of how many physical bodies are incarcerated in our country at any given time lately. But we don't talk about, in the last 10 years, the millions of people who were released from prison. And we don't talk about, like Jeremy's saying, that we're all connected to our family and our friends and our community. And then we definitely don't talk about victims, how victims are behind the door too. Yeah. Right. So when we think about this massive system, this massive criminal legal system, this massive system of laws and punishment that we have in this country, a lot of people will get turned off by the conversation around reform about these 2.3 million criminals that we're talking about helping. This is what I hear people say all the time. But behind the door is much more than just the people who committed crimes. And we also can't ever engage in a conversation without recognizing that the United States of America is probably the leader in innocent people in prison as well. We have an also unquantifiable number of people who didn't commit a crime that they're being held for, locked behind these cell doors, and then all of this baggage and all of these things come with us. And so we've got the physical door that we were held captive behind. But what's more than that is we have a metaphor for the door that society is locked behind, because when we talk about these issues, when we talk about recovery and addiction, when we talk about prison reform, when we talk about reentry, we get lost sometimes because people don't want to talk about what criminals deserve, but it's so much bigger than that. What about what their kids deserve? What about what their families deserve? What about what victims who have experienced crime, especially violence crime and domestic violence and sexual assault, what do these people deserve? And the longer that we stay stuck in this mentality that we can just punish people and lock them behind a door and hold them captive, and that's somehow a solution to a problem, when what we find through our lived experience and even what we find, that research really shows is that it's so much deeper than that. That there's so many more levels to it than that. And we live in a society that's full of trauma and full of a state of unhealing because of the way that we consider what justice is. And we don't do justice to families, and we don't do justice to victims of crime, and we definitely don't do justice to people who are punished for crime. And that's really what this metaphor of the door is about. Like, we've got a system that's keeping our whole country behind this door of beliefs about what you should do when somebody's addicted to drugs, what you should do when somebody commits a crime, and what you should do when something happens in our community where somebody is hurt. And really what it's about, like we've been talking about, it's about community, it's about connection, it's about humanizing people to understand that addiction is a disease, and crime oftentimes is not just a choice that somebody woke up in the morning and said, I'm going to go out and hurt somebody today. That it's more complex than that.
Well, really what you're talking about is all these different forms of trauma, right? Like our there's been this term, the opioid epidemic, right? These different forms of epidemics, right? And really what this country has in our society, pretty much every community that I've seen that has a trauma epidemic, right? That's what you're talking about, is like multiple levels of trauma. Trauma, like what you just named, is like trauma. And what I understand is that community, right, starts to heal trauma, right? Like that's what trauma it takes, is a community, right? Because this trauma will put us in this box, right? It puts us in the box. Like, I'm a convict, and I'm in that box, right? And so how do we get out of that box? Is to invite people into the community, right? And make sure that they have a community to be in, right? Because then I can start dealing with trauma, right?
Yeah.
Because before I would get out of prison and I would go back to the people that I knew where I fit in, right?
Yeah.
I would go back to, like, I can remember getting out one time and being around my family, sitting around the table in the living room and shit like that, and I felt completely alone,
Yeah.
and I felt like I didn't know anybody in the room, and I was dealing with my family. You know what I mean? It wasn't until I connected to a community that I was able to start healing trauma. So when you're talking about this stuff, it's the complexity of the trauma, you know, because it's easy to look at it on an individual basis. Like, I'm the only one that's going through this. When I have been a victim of a crime, a violent crime, sexual assault, like been locked up, this and that, like I get out and I feel like no one understands me, right? Until I meet somebody that does understand me and I connect to it, right? Because, you know, I connect with you as a human being because I know that you know. You know what I'm saying? I know that you know. So, like, I'm going to want to talk to you a little bit more. Yeah. And when I can, like, connect to something that's, like, bigger than myself, it's the opposite of the trauma, how we're responding to trauma. The trauma it doesn't necessarily go away, but it's easier for me to deal with, right?
Do you think that's like, is listening to you say that? Do you think is that the goal of this whole thing? Because like we're riding this idea right now. We know we got something special, right? We know we got this prison door. We know we got a community of people that are really changing the narrative and doing these high level things that nobody in society expects it from us, right? But is that what you're talking about? Do you think that's really the goal of this door and this podcast and the Recovery Connections work?
I've been looking for a platform for a long time to build around, like a podcast and all this stuff, because I do think that myself, there's a lot of people that have a lot of good things to say that can provide like a ton of education. And the door becomes like the platform. Right now we have this tangible thing. It's sitting right there, right? It's sitting right here. We have pictures of where we took it to. You know what I mean? And so once we have this tangible thing, like I've started, you know, I started an outpatient treatment center, right? I started a recovery community center. I started recovery houses. I started a residential program. And those things don't start until there's a tangible thing to start them in. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so, and really the community starts in something, right? Like the community is brought together by some event, something that's going on, right? So the door sort of represents to me like the tangible thing that can bring this community together in a little bit of ways. You know what I'm saying? So maybe somebody might listen to this thing and go, man, I can connect with these dudes. You know what I'm saying? I know exactly what they're talking about, and they're going to want to continue to talk about it. You know what I mean?
And how do we address the people that listen to this thing and they're like, I can't connect to these people? And I guess like that's kind of my question is, you know, when you were talking about how, you know, we connect and we can start to sort out some of our trauma and stuff because we find somebody who we feel like, man, that person gets it. And so is that what the goal of this all is to get more people to get it, to get people?
I think so.
You don't have to go to prison
to understand
that it's a shitty
place
to be.
Now that's a great point, Brandon, because you don't have to go to prison to understand. You don't have to go to prison to understand trauma. Yeah. Right?
And you don't have to understand struggle.
To understand what it's like to feel alone and depressed and the anxiety and all this stuff. Like you don't have to go to prison to feel those emotions. And like our stories out here are never going to be the same, right? Yeah. Like we're always coming from a different place, different backgrounds, different this and different that. But like what we can connect to is the human experience, right? Like because if somebody tells me, I don't know them from anywhere, right? And they tell me, you know, I've been depressed before. I felt like killing myself, right? I felt like I know what that feels like. Yeah. You know what I mean? I already know you. You know what I'm saying? Because I know what that feels like, and
there might be different circumstances, but the feeling's
the feeling, right? The thing is all the same.
It might not be identical, but the underlying, you know, a lot of those things can be the same sometimes, and that's what I think. Like you were talking about this earlier, and one thing that I really hope from this whole thing and everything that we're thinking about doing and this work is like, man, I get so tired of people trying to tell me that like, oh man, it's crazy what you were able to do when you're in prison. Oh, you got your master's degree and you started your PhD, and anytime that I'm in a conversation with somebody, they're like, oh, but that's you though. That's not prisoners. And I always ask people like, what does that mean to you? And how do you know that? How do you know that there's not 500 people at Maine State Prison right now that if given the opportunity to get a master's degree, had people telling them that they believed in them, and like if we had a society that promoted education and healing and all these things, like I'm not, like you said, I'm not exceptional. I don't consider myself to be special. I consider that I had some special circumstances with some important people who made me believe in myself in a place where I never had before. But like that's got to be, we talk about reform and we talk about recovery, we talk about like what we're really, in some ways, one of the things we're talking about is just like making people believe in people who are struggling and suffering, and making people support and actually getting to a place where we generate some conversations that aren't about the statistics, and they're not about, like they're not so adversarial. They're really about, like you said, like I'm a human being, and when I see you struggling, I can relate to that struggle because I've been to a struggle of my own. And so what we have behind this door of mass incarceration is a shit ton of people that people in society feel like I can't relate to them because they're bad, right? They're bad. That's why they went to prison, because they're bad people, and I'm not a bad person, so I can't possibly relate to what they've been through. When in reality, we can all relate to each other a lot more than we think we can, but we gotta open the door. Yeah. Right? We gotta take the door off the hinges.
Off the hinges.
So that's what we're here to do, right? We're here to kick these doors off the hinges and generate some conversations with some people to say, we might not be as different as you think, right? We actually might be more alike, but this giant, prison door has separated my humanity from your humanity. Yeah. And, even when we were on the inside, our doors that we had in front of us separated even our humanity from each other, even on the inside, because of the code, because of the, the different politics that are at play in prison. And so we get so used to that we come out, and now it's almost like, what's cool is we're carrying this door around us. But what's not cool is that a lot of people carry their prison door around them metaphorically when they come home, and it acts as a barrier between them connecting with somebody at that human level, right? At that that level of vulnerability to say and people hide from their story because they're so afraid of what's on the other side of that metaphoric door. And that's what we really want to accomplish. And some of this is just organically happening now through our conversation, but what we got to do is make sure that people understand that you don't have to understand the details of my trauma and the details of my struggle to relate to that I have trauma and that I've struggled. Yeah. And the moment that we shed the labels and we shed the belief that everybody who goes to prison, everybody who's suffering from addiction is bad, is the moment that we can connect at a human level and really come to a better understanding of each other and actually start to create some healing in our society around some of these issues we're talking about. And that's the direction that we're trying to move towards with these conversations, and with putting this big ass door in your truck and driving it around different places and asking people questions about it. So
yeah, I'm excited to sort of move this forward, right? Yeah. I'm excited to bring on have conversations with some people that really know a lot more than I do about this subject, and kind of highlight the advocacy that's going on not only in the state but across the country. I know that you have, like your career is taking you to a place where you're able to get out of the state and start to really have an impact on a national level, which is really cool to see for you. But I'm interested. I'm really excited to talk to more people and really so people will actually see that this isn't just this little pocket that's going on, that people actually care. There's organizations out there that actually really care about what happens to people before they go, while they're in, and when they get out. You know what I mean? I think that this platform is going to be able to do that for us. And I'm excited to bring the door to down to another place and show how the door. Some of these neighborhoods that are across the country is literally a door into the prison system
just
already.
a funnel,
you know what I'm
right?
saying?
Like,
it's just
they
like
might
this.
as well just put the building around the neighborhood.
Right, you might as well
yeah.
just do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
And so keep an eye out, right? Coming to a city near you, behind
yeah,
the door.
we're coming for it.
Door number 18.
We're also the other part of this I think is important to talk about is that you know so some of the pictures that we're going to take, we're going to be putting those on T-shirts, sweatshirts, things like that, so other people can carry the message, but also so that we can raise more money and funding for prison reform.
Yeah.
So we'll be getting some more, the money out there to some of these organizations that sort of need it. Looking forward to that. I'm just looking forward to like getting the awareness out there and spreading this stuff around and hopefully build a stronger, or be a part of building a stronger, reentry community, education community around this stuff. And I think this is going to be really fun and exciting, and also kind of satisfying that we have this platform for me personally.
And for anybody that's listening, number one, thank you for tuning in to episode number 1 of the Behind the Door podcast. And really what we want is for you to encourage everybody, like, look us up on social media, right? Share our pages, share our posts, tell your friends, tell your family, tell people that you think would hate this podcast that they should listen to it anyway. What we're trying to do is we're really trying to bring some people in from around Maine and around the country to really engage in this conversation. And we want to make every episode exciting and every episode interesting and give people a reason to tune in and continue to grow this thing, like Jeremy was saying, with the with the T-shirts and with showing up, like literally just showing up. Tell us where you want us to show up. Where do you want us to pull up with the door at? We're mobile. We got feet on the door.
Pull up.
We got feet on the door. We're going to pull up on you if you ask us to. So, spread the message, share the word, man. We got episode 2 coming at you soon enough.
Word.
Episode 3, hopefully episode 3000. In the not so distant future.
Yeah.
And let's like we said, the motto is kick the door off the hinges. And let's see where this thing goes, man. Thank you everybody for listening. Jeremy, what do you got to say to the people that listen to episode number 1?
We love you guys, man. We love you guys, and I know that this thing usually starts with the supporters first. You know what I mean? So special to be sitting here with y'all, and I'm hoping that we can play a little part in changing the community. Thank you.
Absolutely. Benny, take us away.
I'm looking at my life and what it took to get here. I'm looking at my baby and my pictures and I drip tears. Can only blame myself for them decisions that I made. Can't pin this on my mother cause she wanted a dip state. And this ain't my father's fault cause he stayed with the points. Now when shit hit the fan, I was faced with a choice. Heart vacant and cold cause all this struggle in my life, it's been taking its toll. And I just can't take it no more. I feel like breaking but that ain't me. Got a baby to hold. And I pray to the Lord, hoping he saves me. But maybe there ain't nothing left to save anymore. Cause when you all alone, you start to question why it's like that. Never sent no letters out, knew they wouldn't write back. When I did that bid on my solitary shit, only $10 on that commissary slip. It's better than nothing, yeah, I guess it could be worse. Dressed up in a hearse, but that's the next level down, and it's too close for comfort, so